Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Ledoux, and I am the Director of Hospitality Restaurant Management at the Institute of Culinary Education. Welcome to this installment of our guest lecture series. As a reminder, this demonstration is being broadcast, so if you are watching online, please post questions to the YouTube chat. And for our students and staff here today, please wait for us to pass around the microphone so we can hear all your questions. Our goal in these series of demos and lectures is to highlight the culinary excellence of contemporary chefs and culinary entrepreneurs. In the past few months, we have hosted Chef Nancy Silverton of the Michelin-starred Osteria Mozza, Chef Michael Cimarusti of the Michelin-starred Providence, Chef Stephanie Izard of The Girl and the Goat, and Chef Meg Bickford of the historic Commander's Palace. Chef David LeFevre is a veteran of the Los Angeles dining scene. His culinary career spans more than 30 years. Having attended the Culinary Institute of America and working at some of the country's most renowned kitchens, from the legendary American chef Charlie Trotter to working in celebrated restaurants in France, and 6 years as the executive chef of the Water Grill in downtown Los Angeles. Chef LeFevre is the chef owner of multiple critically acclaimed coastal restaurants along Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach, including Manhattan Beach Post, Fishing with Dynamite, the Arthur J and RYLA. Please join me in welcoming Chef Alice Mai and Chef David LeFevre.
Hi, guys. Awesome. Thanks for being here. I remember when I was sitting in your seat, and I went to the Culinary Institute of America, and one of the chefs that came and spoke his name was Charlie Trotter, and I ended up working for him for a very long time, 10 years, and he became one of my biggest mentors. So maybe that will happen here, hopefully. But let me tell you a little bit about my background. I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. I went to University of Wisconsin for engineering, and the whole time I was raised by a single mother who cooked a lot. And so every day I had to do something, whether it was set the table, do the dishes, sweep the floor, take the bacon and put it on a piece of paper towel to get all the fat out of it. She used to make wonderful chowder and biscuits and all sorts of really great food. And we were really poor. So cooking became something that we did when we celebrated because we could afford it. So my whole life growing up was about when we celebrated, when we did something well, we ate really well. So I decided to stop going to engineering school. I went to CIA. When I was there, I ended up doing my apprenticeship, or our externship, as we called it, at Charlie Trotter's, the guy that I met at school. I went back to culinary school after that. Charlie, I was just telling your sommelier that in the middle of sommelier class, Charlie Trotter called me up in front of the class and offered me a job in Las Vegas at one of his new restaurants. And I said yes, and then I realized he opened 3 weeks before I finished school. So I had to call him back eventually. But I worked at Charlie Trotter's Las Vegas. Then I went to Europe, and I worked in France at 4 different restaurants for a year and a half. Michel Trama, Roger Vergé, Jean Bardet, and then Bernard Loiseau. So all Michelin-starred restaurants. Came back again, worked for Charlie again in Chicago, worked my way up to the top of his kitchen. Took a year when I was 30 and traveled around the world and did what you guys would call pop-ups. We didn't have pop-ups back then, so I'd go to hotels and restaurants and I'd do my menu for a day or up to 2 weeks. And then I'd grab my backpack and I'd go travel for 3 to 4 weeks. And then I would go to another chef that I really admired and I'd stage and work for free for him or her for anywhere from a month to 6 months. So I did that for 2 years. Got recruited out here by the Water Grill. Worked at the Water Grill. I really focused a lot on being a culinarian and learning how to cook and learning what great product was and how to run service. But I really needed to learn how to run an organization. I needed to learn how to, I need to learn about labor, and I need to learn about food costs, and I needed to learn about scheduling and P&Ls. So I went to King's, and they did that for me, and they also gave me a great platform to show my talents. And luckily, we got recognized through Michelin and a Michelin star. And then in 2011, partner and I decided to open up Manhattan Beach Post as an owner. About a year after we opened up Post, a little restaurant next door said they were going to said they were going to sell to Umami Burger. And I said, hey, wait a minute, let's talk. And we ended up buying that space and opening up a little restaurant called Fishing with Dynamite. Right. And then about a year and a half later, this restaurant space down the street became available. And I said, hey, let's do a really great steakhouse called the Arthur J. And then I partnered with my partner side of the business with Simsies and Tin Roof Bistro. We opened a couple more of those. And then in 2020, I don't know if you guys remember 2020, we started a catering company, a relationship with Legends Hospitality. We started a catering company called Local LA with David LeFevre, based out of SoFi Stadium with Stan Kroenke as one of our backers. And then in 2021, a space became available in Hermosa Beach. And one of my longtime chefs, who was a chef, a GM, he was an R&D chef. We worked on a concept for him. We opened that up 2.5 years ago called RYLA with Ray Hayashi. And that's been 2.5 years now. And a year and a half ago, another space came up available right next to RYLA. And Chef Alice has been with us for 6 years. She's been the chef. She's been every front of the house manager position. And we worked on a concept together that we're going to open up this winter called Atta Girl. Atta Girl. Right. So she's amazing, by the way. And if any of you get to work with her, I think about just going and working under her all the time because she's so amazing. So long story short, really what I've tried to do my whole career is surround myself in incredible culinary surroundings, whether that's at Charlie Trotter's, whether it's markets in France, whether it's markets in Thailand, in Japan, in Australia, whether it's going and staging for incredible chefs, Tetsuya in Australia, the Fat Duck in Bray, El Bouilly. I spent a lot of time while I was working continuing to learn through other chefs in other areas. And a lot of times I did that on my own dime. I didn't get paid for a lot of it, but it was an investment for my career. And it's the best thing that I've ever done. And so now as the owner, what I really have to do is the exact same thing. I have to surround myself with great people like Alice, right? And I have to support them in creating a great culinary community that we can have people like you come on board and enjoy. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I really love cooking. I don't like cooking alone, which is kind of weird, right? I figured that out. I really like the camaraderie and the collaboration with people. I love being able to bounce my ideas off with anybody. It doesn't matter if you're brand new to cooking or if you've been cooking for 30 years. I do believe in, everybody's got to say, nobody gets a vote. I'm the owner of the company and I make decisions, but I have great people around me to help me with that. And I think Alice is a great example of, if you are really smart and you're really emotionally mature and you're talented and you've got grit and tenacity and loyalty, opportunities become available. I think that's my plug for you guys. Grit, tenacity, loyalty. So today, we're going to do one of the dishes from Fishing with Dynamite. It's a very new dish. Fishing with Dynamite concept, if I could describe it to you, it's East Coast nostalgia meets West Coast vibe. Okay? I spent a lot of time on the East Coast growing up. I didn't spend a lot of time on the West Coast, but I dreamed of it. I used to do a paper out in Wisconsin listening to the Beach Boys. I wanted to learn how to surf, all these things, right? And so I came out here, and what I really realized is you've got this incredible culture of seafood, kind of lobster shacks and chowder, and the ocean in the East Coast is this dangerous, kind of scary thing that provides people like their livelihood. And then you go to the West Coast, and it's like, dude, let's go surfing, and there's all this fresh, light seafood and raw seafood and ceviches and sashimis. And so I wanted to take those two concepts and put them together and create this gray area of, pristine seafood, but done in a way where you felt this nostalgia from the East Coast, but you felt this really cool vibe of the West Coast. And that's what Fishing with Dynamite has become. So this dish is a good example of that in some sense. It's more of a West Coast vibe. And what we're doing is we're doing cured salmon, right? We're going to serve that over chilled soba noodles. Now, chilled soba noodles is a very popular dish in the summer, spring and summer in Japan. It gets really hot over there, and they love noodles. So they go from doing these hot noodle dishes to chilled noodles, right? We've got a ponzu sauce that actually it's ponzu and dashi mixed together, so it kind of lightens it a little bit. It's got avocado, some sweet corn in it. It's got some fish roe. What else am I missing? I think that's shiso, but we're going to show you pretty much step by step what we do. Some of it we're going to do through the magic of television. Like we've got some things pre-prepped that I'm going to show you how to do it, but some of them take time. But so along the way, if there's any questions, either you can raise your hand, just raise it high enough so I can see it. And if I miss it, somebody just throw an orange at me or something and I'll figure it out. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a dashi, right? And dashi is a really simple, it's basically a stock that you make in Japan. And really what's involved in it is good, clean water, right? We've got wakame, right? But like, we've got basically it's dried seafood that has a lot. You can see on it how white it is. Some chefs will wipe that off, right, with a wet towel. Other chefs keep it on. I keep it on, okay? And the reason that I keep it on the kombu is I like that umami. I like the salt that it adds. Some chefs don't like that because they add soy later and stuff, but I like it, so we keep ours on there. I feel like it's a little bit more soulful. It's kind of on there for a reason, and it adds flavor. So all we're going to do, we're going to take that, we're going to bring it to a simmer. Okay, not a boil, just a very light simmer, just like you would do with a chicken stock or a veal stock. And then we're going to let that simmer for about 5 minutes, okay? I'm going to take that off. I'm going to add our bonito flakes, okay, which is basically tuna that's been dried. It's like you've seen a big red tuna loin or an albacore loin, right? They start out like this. They dry them. They end up about this big, and they look like a piece of wood, okay? They're preserved basically and dried. You take those, you shave them, and this is what you get, right? Long, thin sheets basically of tuna. And if, here, you can just pass this around. You can see actually, if you look at the lighter part of it, you can see the lines that the tuna, the flesh of the tuna makes. You know, when you slice it, you see those lines. You can still see it in that, okay? So that's going to come up to a simmer. In the meantime, I've got some boiling water here, okay? And we're going to cook our noodles. Now, you can use whatever noodle you want. I'm using soba noodles because it's kind of classic. A lot of times we'll use green tea noodles, right? But you can use any noodle. And what you have to do is you have to cook the noodle. You have to chill the noodle, right, to get the right texture without getting it overcooked, undercooked, and chewy. And so, and the other thing you have to do is you have to figure out a way to get it cold without dropping it in ice water. And some of you might say, like, wait, why? Why wouldn't I drop it in ice water? Right? A lot of people do, right? They make a pasta salad, cook the pasta, put it in ice water, and blanch it, right? Shock it, right? Potatoes, blanch potatoes, put them in ice water, right? Vegetables, green beans, salted water into ice water, right? Well, you can do that with vegetables, right? When you do it with starches, so think potatoes, think pastas, right? When you do it with starches, when you shock these things, when they get cold, they're going to absorb whatever you shock them in, okay? So for us, I'm going to take these. I'm just going to drop it in our water. I'm not going to break it up. I don't want these broken up. I want nice long pieces of it to slurp and twirl, right? When we cook the pasta, why do we salt the pasta water? So it'll be salted, it'll be seasoned, right? Well, when we take it out, if I take that out and I put it, there we go. If I take that out and I put it in cold water, it's going to absorb ice water. I don't want my pasta to taste like ice water. I don't want my potatoes to taste like ice water. You guys ever had a white bean salad that the beans don't taste like much, right? Have you ever had a pasta salad where you're like, man, I got to add more and more vinaigrette and it still tastes bland, right? Well, that's because you're shocking it probably in ice water, and that pasta absorbs the ice water. And now you have pasta that tastes like water. And so for us, what we have is I've got some dashi right here, right? And I've made this ahead, and that dashi is flavorful. It's got the kombu in it. It's got kombu in it. It's got the bonito flakes in it. And then afterwards, I actually season it with a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper so it has a very full flavor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cold, I have cold dashi here. You can see it right there. There we go. And as soon as this pasta is done cooking, I'm going to take it out of here. I'm going to drop it in there. And I'm going to let it cool, right? Now, because the pasta is hot, and because this is cool, it's not going to be cold enough to shock it necessarily. It's going to slow down the cooking, right? Well, that means that this pasta, I have to take it out a little early, just a little under, because when I put it in here, it's going to absorb liquid and it's going to continue to soften a little bit. Not a lot, but a little, okay? And you guys cook pasta, you know, maybe it's for a macaroni and cheese or something. You cook the noodles, toss them in oil and put them in the cooler, right? Well, you taste them at the beginning and then 3 hours later, they soften up, right? So what I want to do is I want to get this in, take it out a little early, let it sit in here, absorb that flavor, right? So now my noodles are going to not only taste like buckwheat, they're going to also taste like that. And this is in several things in the dish, so it's going to support the. All right, let me just take a look at this, see where we are. So you can still see it's still white inside. See that? You can still see the white in there. That's starch, right? So I know by tasting it. But you also can know just by looking at it that it's got a little bit of, still has a little bit of time to cook. Meanwhile, back here, the wakame, I'll just bring it over and show you. I'm sorry, the kombu. It's boiling, it's simmering, right? So I'm going to take that, and I'm just going to lower the heat till it gets just to a very slow simmer. I don't want it rapidly boiling, just like chicken stock. You don't want it rapidly boiling because you don't want the fat to emulsify into it. Well, with this, I don't want to take that kombu and boil it and agitate it where it starts to break up. I just want the flavor of it. I don't want the pieces coming off. I don't want anything breaking off into it. It'll help keep it nice and clear. It'll keep the flavor really pure, okay? So that's going in about 3 minutes. I'll take that off. These are the bonito flakes that we'll add to it. And so we got two things going on right now. We got the noodles, right, that we're going to shock in the dashi, and then we've got the kombu that we're making, the kombu and the bonito flakes that are going to make our dashi, right? Now, we're going to need dashi for our sauce, too. So I wanted to show you how we make it, how fast it's going, so that it's not, it's not boiling. And then it's a really easy thing. Afterwards, you're just going to take this off. And actually, I think we're pretty good. I can tell by the texture of the bonito, of the kombu. And take it off, and we're gonna add the flakes, right? And we're just gonna let it sit. I'm not gonna agitate it. I want to keep it just still and simple. And then what I'll do is I'll decant that. Okay? So that's how we make our dashi. Now, some people add vegetables to it. Some people add mushrooms to it, depending on what they're going to use it for. For us at the restaurant, we don't, because we use it in so many different things. Okay? All right, this is done. All right. So I've got the noodles. Now, all I'm going to do, I'm going to go right into the bonito, into the dashi. Be right back. There we go. Okay, so I can tell just by stirring it, right, that they're still slightly, they were warm when I added it. The cold dashi is counteracting it. but you can see that it's just going to start to absorb it. In a little bit, Alice is going to hand me back that strainer in a little bit. And we're going to strain that off, and then we're going to season it for the dish, okay? So that's just going to sit right over there. Okay. Next thing we have is the actually cured salmon. This is not a cured salmon in the sense of Swedish or Norwegian cured salmon or anything from up there where they're covering it with salt and sugar and they're letting it sit for hours and hours on end. This is a light cure, right? So at the restaurant, we do this in the morning before service, and we cure it for that service. And then at night, we do the same thing. We cure it we cure it before service and have it for the night. I wouldn't want to make this in the morning and then serve it. I wouldn't want to make it at like 8 a.m. and then serve it at 7 o'clock at night and have almost 12 hours of curing on it. It'll over cure the fish. So it's almost like a seasoned fish in that aspect, right? So first thing that we're going to do is you're just going to take a nice piece of salmon, right? And we're going to cut some beautiful cubes out of it. You can see I've taken the bloodline, any skin, any non-flesh pieces, and I've taken them off. And all I want to do are some nice, beautiful slice of cubes. Now, a lot of times what we do is we'll take the whole fillet and I'll cut the tail off and the belly off, and I'll use that section that's left for our salmon portions. And then I'll take the other parts, the belly, which is really good, and the tail, and I'll cut those into the cubes because they don't make beautiful portions for an entree, but the flesh is amazing, right? So in this scenario, right, a lot of times what we would be doing is we'd be cutting kind of some of the off pieces, and we'd use those for our noodle dish, and then we could save the little tiny pieces for our tartars, our force meats, our mousselines, anything like that, okay? So I'm going to do just enough for probably 2 orders here, but nice portions, right? We want to be able to show them this is a nice piece of fish. I don't want to throw triangles and squares and circles. Like, we want to show off all those incredible knife skills that we learned through our career, right? And we also want it to cure at the same rate, right? So if these are all different sizes and shapes, right, it's really tough for them to cure at the same rate. Okay, take this. Top, thanks. All right, so I'm going to take these into a bowl. No pin bones, no cartilage, no skin, right? All we're going to do is, it's really simple. We're going to start, I've got Thai chili, right? I'm going to add some Thai chilies to it. That's going to add some spice. Now, this makes this feel even more Southern California to me because there's no way they would use these in Japan, right? Like, that's just not part of the culture, super spicy food in that sense. But it's a Japanese dish we're doing in Manhattan Beach, California. So we've got the Thai chili in there, and we want to make sure I get that in there and kind of just make sure we can massage it a little bit and get that into the flesh because we want that heat. Now, I add the chilies first because if I add the oil first and then I add the chilies to it, sometimes that oil can get absorbed and kind of block the chili from going in. So sometimes you're wondering, like, God, I keep adding these things and it doesn't get spicier. Well, you got to figure out at what point you're adding it because sometimes, you know, the actual marinade will take the heat, but the fish may not take it in, okay? So we've added that. Really simple. I'm going to add I'm basically seasoning it, right? And I use fleur de sel, right? Like I would be eating a poke, right? And you're going to just mix that in. Now remember, these are a pretty nice dice, right? They're pretty thick, so I want some stuff to get in there. And I want that salt to penetrate. A lot of time, every time I cook, my sister goes, "You're going to add that much salt?" Right? Well, yes, I am, and the food always tastes great, right? So a little bit of sesame oil, right? Just going to toss that in there and let that marinate, okay? It only takes about an hour, okay? It only takes about an hour, and after an hour, you'll see it'll weep a little bit. Some of the moisture will come up. It'll firm up a little bit, right? But it'll also absorb all those flavors, okay? Got that over here. I'm going to set that aside for now. Yeah, can you hold that? Yeah, just on the back side of that. Great. All right. Great, great, great. Noodle, two things here. Number one, we'll do, okay. So this is our dashi, right? And so notice I'm not just grabbing it and just like whipping it around. I want to decant this as much as I can. Now, this is a really small amount. We only did 1 quart, okay? Because we're only doing, literally, we're doing like 4 ounces of sauce for this demo. But normally we make this in a really big pot. You know, we're doing 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 gallons. And what'll happen is you can't really tell here because it's so shallow, but in a big pot, it'll start to settle down, right? And so what we want to do when it settles is we want to just really take it just off the top and let it collect and not move it around and don't stir it, right? I'm just letting that pour off. And I'm not going to sit there and jostle it to try to get the last 2 tablespoons, right? I'm just going to let it stick to the pot, let it go out, and make sure that some of the bonito flakes might go, but I don't want this falling in there and clomping in there, right? We're not going to take the ladle and push it through. It's not like a veal jus, right? And trust me, I'm like one of the stingiest chefs there are. So for me to leave that in there tells you what we want for quality too, okay? So you can see it just sits there in the bottom, right? There's a little bit of liquid. I'm not that worried about catching. Here you go, Alice. And then we get a nice clear broth. You can see the bottom of that pan. You can see how clear it is. It's not cloudy. It's not thick. But if we let the kombu boil away, or if we add the bonito flakes and boil it, it's going to get cloudy. It's going to get murky. It tastes that way. Okay? So cool. We have that, which we used here. And we'll also use it, careful, we'll also use it in our sauce. Okay? Next thing we've got here, so we've got the noodles, right? I'm going to take out just what I need right now. And again, the noodles, I don't want to break them when I put them in. I don't want to shake them up. I want to have nice long noodles, right, to do in the dish, okay? Now, these noodles, all right, here we go, Alice. Thank you, Alice. She's being awesome. I couldn't do this without her. So we're going to use, I think I used this already, right? I've got just a little bit of chili oil. You can buy chili oil. You can make your chili oil. We make our chili oil. It's got basically a couple types of chilies. We use garlic, ginger, and green onion in it. A little bit of salt. We call it momo. But we make our own oil, and then we lightly season it, right? And then just a little bit of salt. I don't need pepper because there's pepper in there. And then I'm going to use just a little bit of, whoops, wrong cilantro there. Can you grab me the cilantro leaves, please? You don't need much, but a little bit of cilantro and shiso oba. We're just going to mince it and add it to our noodles. And I like kind of like a chiffonade almost, not a mince, but more of a chiffonade to get in there with those noodles, the same shape. And we're going to add the sweet corn in there. All that is cooked and kerneled sweet corn. There's nothing else to it. We're going to add this corn. You can see we've cooked it on the cob and then cut off like kind of little tiles of it. I always like keeping big tiles because the more you mix it, it'll break up. And it's always nice to get more than one kernel. It's nice to get like 3 or 4 if you can, right? We're going to put that into the pasta. You don't need to use all of it. And then we're just going to Work that in. And then make sure, it's going to be tough to do with a spoon, sorry. Pretty good. All right. You know when you want to eat it, you're like, maybe I should just eat this. Okay. So those are our noodles. They're all set, right? Let me just give this. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our ponzu sauce. So we've got some citrus here. Here you go, Alice. All right. So our sauce is going to be 1 part ponzu to 1 part kombu. Okay? You guys have all had you guys have all had ponzu sauce at a Japanese restaurant, right? It's a pretty strong dipping sauce with citrus in it, right? Well, that would be probably too strong for this dish because you're eating these noodles, right? You actually want it almost like, you want the flavor to be almost like a broth, right? More brothy than you would have, say, ponzu sauce, right? And so we're going to actually do that. So we've got a citrus vinegar, right, that we use right here. We got soy sauce right here. We got mirin and sake, about the same amount, a little bit more mirin than sake. And then we've got, put these down here. What do we have? Bonito and kombu. So you can see the layers that are coming in. Now, because we're a restaurant, and I'm not going to warm this up, I'm going to add it directly, okay? We use ponzu for one of our main dishes. We have a hamachi sashimi that we do. It's our #1 seller. It's with avocado and serrano chilies. It's been on the menu since the beginning. It's our #1. It's never been anything under our #1 selling item. And one of the reasons is because of this. And what we do is we take this ponzu and we age this for a minimum of 5 days. We let the kombu, we let the bonito flakes sit, we let it mellow, right, for at least 4 days. A lot of times, it's a lot more than that. We always have a 5-gallon bucket of this going. When we get halfway, we make another 5-gallon bucket. Like that's how we do it. It's almost like a mustard. You got to stay weeks ahead on making a mustard. Albert can remember when we opened up Post, Chef Lee, we made mustard, and I made mustard, and I tasted it 3 days later, and I'm like, I'm a bad chef. I don't know how to make mustard. 3 weeks later, I was like, this mustard's amazing. It was the same thing. It just needed to age. Well, that's what we're going to do with this. We're going to let that age for 4 or 5 days, and then we're going to strain it, okay? Now, the next thing here, pardon me. Yep. Can you just hand me I'll just use this. The other thing we got to add to that, sorry, I almost forgot, was all the fresh citrus, right? So we've got oranges, right, that we're going to add to it. Now, I don't have to worry about the seeds because those are going to get strained out with the kombu and the bonito later. So we just do 1 to 1 to 1, 1 orange to 1 lime to 1 lemon. And we always want to use a squeezer with it because you just get so much more out of it. But I want it in the container to get all that oil too. Did you see the oil kind of come off of it? That oil is really good. It's really flavorful. It's not bitter either. So you can get even more lemon and lime flavor. That's why when we do recipes with a microplane zester, right? I don't do it over the paper and then transfer it. I always do it over whatever I'm making with the citrus on the bottom because when you scrape it, the oil comes out. Right? So sometimes you're making a recipe and you're like, wow, it's not as lemony as I'd like. Well, get all that citrus, get the zest and the oil in there and it'll taste great. As long as you don't go down into the pith. All right. There we go. Okay, cool. So what it looks like when you're done is it looks like this. So you can see the difference. Even if I put it, can you hand me do we have a small white ramekin? No? Here, I'll use one of these. it. It's good. Even if you looked at it right now compared to then, you can see it's cloudier, it's darker, right? Once it sits, it'll sit. All those things will settle. All the citrus pieces will settle. We'll decant it off, strain it. It'll come out nice and clear and brown and beautiful. And I got to tell you, what we do with this, there's several things we do. We make this sauce with it. We also take that, we grate radish and green apple into it for our sashimi dish, which everybody asks, what do you do to that ponzu sauce? It's so good. You can serve it with cardboard, right? Well, a lot of it has to do with once we have the sauce and we add radish, fresh grated red radish, and fresh grated green apple to it to add a light sweetness and a little bit radish flavor. And then those pieces, right, those grated pieces hold the sauce. You ever know how hard it is to get ponzu sauce on a fish, right? Because it falls off. It's not viscous. But if you do daikon in it, or you do radish in it, or little pieces of apple, those things soak it up. And then you grab that grate, and now it holds the sauce so you can get more flavor. Okay? Cool? All right. That's our sauce. This is what our bonito looks like. Sorry, I keep saying bonito. Our dashi looks like. All we're going to do, 1-to-1, and that's our sauce. That's the sauce for our noodle dish. Okay? So, made dashi, made our noodles, made our ponzu, combined the ponzu and the dashi, right? So now we have basically cured the salmon, right? It's only been about 10 minutes, but through the mystery of television and prepping, we have all of our stuff ready. All right. Could we get that shaved ice, please? The crushed ice? Cool. Oh, never mind. All right. So I'll have you set that up, Alice. All right. So what we want to do is we want to take, so I have some salmon that we cured earlier, right? That's ready to go. You can still see, you can see the color difference. It darkens, right, a little bit as it cures. Sizes are the same. Everything else is the same. I also have some noodles that we did earlier, but we can also use our noodles. Either one is good. I've got shisoba leaves. I've got some cilantro we have. So these are going to be for garnish and for plating, for eating. I've got some red radish that I've sliced. I want to get this as close as you guys can. You see the little green thing on it? That means you did a good job, right? Nice and thin. It's got the stem on it. That's beautiful. It looks like a cross-section of a radish, right? See how thin it is? So we've just sliced it thin, and then I did it, what, 20 minutes ago, I think? Maybe probably a little bit longer than that. Ice water. Soak it in ice water, okay? All right, so we'll plate up. Alice, look at that. Alice did a great job there. We're going to take our noodles, right, and basically we want to spread them. Now, this is kind of an appetizer side, but it's kind of interesting. A lot of people will order this in our restaurant, and then they'll order French fries, and they'll be like, oh, I'm good. I've had my meal, right? I'm like, okay, cool. Well, maybe we should charge more. Maybe we should charge more for it. So we've got that. We've got avocado. Now, how many people make guac? How many people have a dish that they have to serve with avocado? Okay, I'm going to teach you guys this. I learned it from a prep cook about 20 years ago, okay? Cut your avocado, run it under hot, very hot water or in boiling water, and then let it sit and cool, and it won't oxidize. So you know how everybody's like, cover it with plastic and do that? If you just run it under hot water, it won't oxidize. I had a prep cook who was doing, I'm like, dude, why are you rinsing the avocado? And he's like, baby, come back at 2 o'clock, I show you. I was like, baby, all right. Our relationship has changed. All right, so all I want is a couple nice pieces of avocado, right? You can take the skin off however you want. I'm just doing this right now quickly. So I just want nice chunks of avocado that you can see, right? Preferably pretty square. All right. We're going to place those in there. In there. Oops. We gotta. So you want to space the salmon out. When I worked at King's, and I still use phrase today with Alice and my other chefs, what we say is we want the seafood to be the star of the show, right? That's what, it's a seafood dish. We want the seafood to look beautiful. So don't cover it with a bunch of garnishes where you're like, what fish is that? Make it stand out, make it look beautiful, right? Couple pieces, couple flecks of cilantro, nice shiny side up, not the dull side, right? Want to take, let's find one nice piece here. I could have done this early, but beforehand, but you want to tuck that just underneath and let those noodles sit. Okay, you've got these beautiful eggs. Now, do I want to put these eggs on top of the salmon? No, I want it to stand out. It's going to stand out if I put it next to the avocado because of the contrast between the orange and the green. See that? So I want it to contrast. You can always put, see how it looks right next to the bowl too? Nice, and you get that white and that orange. Okay, so we just have some little bit, some Tabasco. I'm going to use some toasted and salted sesame. And I'm going on the fish with that. That's okay. A little bit, but you want the majority of it, the rest of the plate. Now, remember those perfect radishes with the green on them? See how they're translucent? You can see through them onto the plate. These beautiful curls, right? Look at that. Alice, am I missing anything? I don't think so. All right. You lose your memory as an old man. You'll someday. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then we've got our chilled ponzu, right? Our chilled ponzu and dashi combined, right? I'm not going to sit there and go. I don't want to pour it all over everything. It's going to get underneath and get to everything, and I don't want to ruin the beautiful plate I did. So I'm just going to pick one spot and go right there with it. And once you see it come up on the edge, once you see it peeking out, we know we're good. All right? Let's take this. Thank you. So, once we're all set here, sorry, I got to wipe down and clean up. We serve it on chilled ice, right? Just like we do our raw bar, right? Why? I want it to be cold. This is not a room temperature dish, all right? If you serve it, I mean, look, when it's 90 degrees out in Tokyo and 95% humidity in Tokyo, you don't want a lukewarm noodle dish. You want it cold, right? And so we've added enough sauce that's kind of brothy underneath, right? So you can dip those noodles, pull it up and eat it, and it stays cold. You can go back in and dip it, and it stays cold. The fish should be cold. Everything should be cold, okay? So that's it. Really simple, really good for lunch and good for summer. All right. So, thank you. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes, let's grab the mic.
Here you go, Alice.
Thank you for waiting for the mic to ask a question, so everybody on YouTube can hear as well.
Hi, Chef.
Hi.
My name is Deja Wright. My question for you is, when you're doing the sauce, you said you stored it 5 days. Did you store it dry or did you store it cold?
No, cold. And so what we do is, you know, what it does is it mellows everything out. It settles. It kind of separates, right? And you can do it longer than that, right? But you don't need to. There comes a point where the kombu and the bonito flakes start to reabsorb, and you're starting to lose some of it. And what they're doing is they're absorbing flavors that we tried to get out of them, right? So there comes a point we find that it's like 4 to 5 days. We take it, we decant it, we label it, and then we store it. And then you get down halfway and you start the next batch because we go through so much of it. I mean, we go through 3 ounces an order about, and we sell, 50 to 60 a day. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chef.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chef.
Good question.
Who else has a question?
So, is this working? So fundamentally, what makes a dashi?
Well, it's a stock, right? And basically, it's the bonito flake and the kombu are the 2 main ingredients. A lot of people add other things depending on what they're going to do to it later, right? And so if you've got a dashi, if you've got recipes in your restaurant where, let's say you're going to use the dashi for miso soup and you're going to serve mushrooms in the miso soup, right? If that's all you used it for, then you could do mushrooms in it to fortify a mushroom flavor. But if I'm also doing this dish and I don't want mushroom flavor, we keep it very, very simple, right? But it's really, I mean, I've seen chefs add those dried shrimp to it, dried scallops. I've seen them add, Tokyo negi, which is basically like a leek, a green onion. I've seen them add daikon to it. It really depends on what they're going to use it for.
It's not much different than like a chicken stock.
It's no different than a chicken stock. Like if you do a normal chicken stock, you're doing mirepoix, you're doing chicken, and you're doing your bay leaves, your bouquet, and all that, right? But if I'm going to make that chicken stock only for like I said, like a mushroom soup, why not add button mushroom scrap or something to it to fortify that flavor early on, right? Instead of doing it in 3 different stages later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then my second part of this question is, and the kombu is just like a preserved seaweed?
It's just a seaweed that's just dried.
And the white is just like salt?
The white is the salt water.
Okay,
That's,
cool.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's got that umami flavor to it. By the way, that's why, you saw me make the ponzu sauce and we added bonito and kombu to that. Well, we did that because we want some of that flavor, but for a ponzu sauce, I don't want to add dashi to it and thin it out, right? I'm trying to keep as much of that concentrated citrus flavor. So instead of using dashi to it for our sashimi, I just add it directly. But when we use it for our chilled noodle dish, we add dashi. So like if I was just making ponzu for my chilled noodle dish, I wouldn't add the wakame and the bonito to it. I would just, because we already have that. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Hope that's not too confusing.
Hello, Chef.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, when adding the citrus, why didn't you opt out for just using the zest instead of waiting for the
because
oils?
it's got a different flavor. Yeah, it's got flavor and it's got liquid, right? And zest, which is great. I like zest, right? But zest also has the oil and it has a different smell and a different flavor to it. So there's a lot of time that I personally use a lot of zest and stuff. A lot of times I'll use zest when I don't want the acidic part in there that'll decolor or denature a protein. So I'll use a lot of zest. I don't go down to the pith. I do just the zest, right? So, I mean, if I wanted to marinate salmon, right, why don't I use lemon juice? Well, it'll turn it gray. But what do the Norwegian do? They use the zest. They use lemon zest and lime zest in there because it denature the proteins and turn it grayish white. Good question. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Who else has a question?
I'm a little bit worried about eating raw fish.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there, when you cook fish to 165, you kill parasites. So are you just taking that risk when you eat raw
Yep, you
fish?
take a risk in walking out the door every day, right? And so pristine seafood, number one, is you got to have really good suppliers from
Right.
really good waters,
Okay.
right? And a lot of what you get is already frozen, which will kill it won't kill necessarily bacteria, but it will get any parasites that are in there, they will die,
Okay.
right? So, I mean, and then when you butcher and you're cooking your fish and you're butchering your fish, you got to be looking at it. There's some species out there right now that have parasites in them. I mean, anybody who's ever butchered a lot of cod, like Pacific cod or Atlantic cod will know there are parasites in their bellies on the sides, and you got to look at that and you got to see that, and that's why we have illuminated fish boards so you can see things like that. But ultimately, I mean, a lot of those fish, especially bottom feeders, right? That's where a lot of the parasites are, and they end up in there. And sometimes, I mean, look, I've butchered fish since I was 21 years old, and we've gotten the best fish from around the world, and it still happens. You know, it still happens. But a lot of the stuff you're eating when you're eating raw fish, a lot of that's frozen beforehand, especially in Japanese restaurants. You know what I mean? So you don't have to worry about that. And you can always cook your fish to higher temperatures. I'd much rather not do that and take the risk personally, because I don't know anyone that's ever been hospitalized or sick from it so far, you know, from parasites in that aspect. I'd worry more about chicken. Yeah.
Oh.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Who else? Questions?
Really what it's sourcing from, the waters that you're sourcing it from the people that you're sourcing it from. I mean, some of the best relationships that we have in our industry are with our seafood suppliers.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep going.
If it's not too much information, where do you guys source your fish from?
We've got probably nine different finfish suppliers, and we probably have as many oyster suppliers. So we get oysters direct from Prince Edward Island. We get oysters directly from Virginia. We get oysters directly from BC, like all over. And then sometimes we have to go locally through, like, if we have a huge run, all of a sudden, we have a super busy day and we need oysters the next day, we have to go through our local purveyors who may have oysters available. But oysters are great. They're alive. It's alive. I mean, you guys are eating a live animal when you eat an oyster. I mean, technically, it should be 30 seconds dead. But oysters are alive. They're living while we keep them. So oysters are like the best example when you want to talk about pristine seafood and eating fresh. And I mean, you're eating, like, it's shucked. You cut the abductor muscle. Thank you very much. And then you eat it, right? So it's oysters especially, you have to be extremely picky, and you have to have your finger on that product, right? Because if you serve one gritty bad oyster, people don't like oysters. But if you serve them a perfect, chilled, cold, perfectly cut, clean oyster, it can be heavenly.
Chef, I noticed how well you and Chef Mai worked together and how
It's hard.
clean your station was at all times. How important is it to have that relationship, and what do you look for cleanliness with your chefs that are interviewing and so on and so forth?
Yeah, you know, I always have this phrase, like, if you have a clear table, you'll have a clear mind. Okay. You ever gone home after school or after work and you have dinner and you watch TV and then you go to bed and your room's a mess and you're like, ugh, like, at some point I'm going to have to take care of this. At some point I'm going to have to do my laundry. At some point I got to fold my laundry. At some point I'm going to have to dust, right? Well, it's the same thing here. Like, if you wait to clean, if you wait till it's like, oh, now it's time to clean because it's really dirty, you have to have a nervous tick when you're cleaning. You have to be like wiping, like nervous tick every 20 seconds, wiping something. Otherwise, you're going to have 30 minutes cleaning up this disaster you created, and it's going to be at the worst time possible. So I always say, claro mesa, claro cabeza, like clean table, clean head, right? And I'll get to it just a minute. Like, no, like, I'm not going to yell at you for being 5 seconds late for putting the food up because you were cleaning your station, right? I'm not going to yell at you at all, but there's priorities, and your priority has to be keeping this and this clean and focused and organized. And I can tell by looking at chefs within 5 minutes, are they going to be, is this someone we're going to have to teach? Is this someone that we're going to have to hold accountable and talk to about all the time? Or do they have that down? Because one thing you can get down right now in school is being clean and not being the messy chef. You can do that here right now. You can go into a restaurant. You can have that ahead of 50 to 70% of all of the other people applying for the job, right? And then when it gets busy and hectic, it's part of you You can't take it away. You can't stop doing it because it's this, it's like Tourette's. You're like, I just got to do this. I have to, right? Versus like, oh, I'll get to it when I can. And you're never going to, like, look, I worked at Trotter's for 10 years. I never had time to get to anything, right? You have to make your time by being organized and being clean. Yeah. And then working with Alice, I mean, first of all, she's awesome, right? And the way we're working well is because of Alice. Very little to do with me, right? But, the reason that Alice is a partner, okay, a business partner, which means Alice has equity in her restaurant, okay, is because we have a partner relationship, which means I don't have to tell Alice things twice. When I say, hey, you should look into getting that tile fixed, that's not a suggestion to her. She just does it, right? I don't have to have conversations about her restaurant being clean. I don't have to have conversations with Alice about integrity, about humility, about respect. We have a partner relationship before we were partners, right? That's why we're doing a restaurant together and a business together. Because I don't have owner-chef conversations. We have partner conversations, right? So that's why, and she's here. Normally, she wouldn't be able to be here, right? But our restaurant's a little bit delayed. She's got some time. I'm getting old, so, but,
yeah, my question is a little more about like your experience and like what made you feel ready to like be an owner and stop doing like the traveling and learning and just like doing things on your own time and dime, and like what made you feel ready for it?
well, I got some advice early on in my career, and that they said, surround yourself with incredible people, incredible food, and don't worry about the money. Don't worry about being a sous chef. Just worry about having the skills, the knowledge, and the emotional maturity that a sous chef has to have. Not about becoming a sous chef, because you guys can go be a sous chef right now. There's some restaurant out there that will title you a sous chef and give you the money, right? But that doesn't mean you're ready for it, And so for me, what look, staging to me was great. I went to France. I lived in a room with 6 other Japanese guys. They didn't speak English. I didn't speak Japanese. We spoke broken French. We worked our tails off, and I read my dictionary every day. I wrote down questions that I had in class, during service, that I didn't know how to say. I went back to my dictionary and I learned how to say them in French. And then by the way, we did 2 services a day. So I went back at night, and then I said, combien de temps, un specimen, s'il vous plaît, like, show me an example. How long? What temperature? What size? How many? Like, those are things you need to know as a cook. Wrote them down, and then they saw me, like, I wasn't standing there waiting to be taught. I was being proactive and trying to learn, right? And yeah, I had some relatives. I did my externship at Charlie Trotter's for 6 months for free. And I had some relatives, like I came from a poor family. And at the time, my mother was very sick. The reason I took Trotter's was because I could take 2 days to visit my mom in the hospital in Madison. My mother approved of it, right? I stayed with a buddy of mine in Chicago on his couch for 6 months. I didn't get paid, but that job, what I learned in that job is why I'm standing here, not only in front of you guys, but we've got 10 restaurants. We've got a catering company. I get speaking engagements. We get licensing. Like, all that was because of learning. It wasn't because of me being 22 and saying I got to make 60 grand a year. Like, no, it was like, I've got to learn. And your 20s are for learning, and every time that I've ever jumped, like, I don't need to know that. It comes back, and you have to learn it the hard way, And so I did that until I was basically 34. I worked in the finest dining restaurants I could find in the world. I mean, you guys know those chefs, El Bulli and Raymond Blanc and all these guys, right? And then I decided to learn about business, about how to run a profitable kitchen, a restaurant, a business. And then once I did both of those, right, then I teamed up with partners who knew the other part of it. One of my partners owned a company called Mimi's Cafe. He had at one time over 110 restaurants in the country. So he knew how to grow and how to scale, and he knew the tools you needed to run one. I ran one restaurant pretty well, but when I opened a second, a third, a fourth, when COVID hit, I had partners that really, all three of my partners were professional restaurateurs, born and worked in restaurants, managers, everything. They never did other jobs. So my partners didn't just supply money, which, by the way, I invested in our company, but they provided insight, hindsight, foresight, experience. When COVID hit, hey, this is what I think we need to do, and we need to do this. And like, if I didn't have partners like that, COVID would have been a different story. And it's one of the reasons. Let me give you this example. 3 months after COVID, right? People were like, what are we going to do? Is this ever going to come back? The conversation my partner, Tom Sims, was having with us was, hey, this is going to be about a year. And in the next year, we're going to find that a lot of people aren't going to have the resources and the ability to get through this. We need to make sure that we're ready to capitalize on the opportunities that come up in a year. I'm like, wait a minute. 2 of our restaurants are closed. We're waiting to reopen. And he's like, yeah, but next May, we got to be ready there's going to be leases available. There's going to be spaces that were available that weren't available before. And that's why we opened up RYLA, because a restaurant got up. They literally got up and left their restaurant, right? Normally, you have to pay to get that lease. You have to pay money to get into that lease. They just got up and left. So we had an opportunity to open a restaurant where we didn't have to pay a substantial amount we normally pay, like we did at Post. Half of our budget was to get that space, not build it, to have it. And so that's a different conversation than what are we going to do with payroll? Like, he was like, dude, in a year, let's pounce. Let's be prepared. What can we do with training? What can we do with our materials right now to be more prepared? And that's the difference between having a partner that's a lawyer that's never done it, who has money, to operators that, it was great. I respected their ability as businessmen, and they respected my ability as a culinary and an operator, and it works out really well. That's a great question. I love talking about it because I love my partners. I would do anything for them. Anybody else? Yeah. We pass this out. Let's start passing it out.
You mentioned you went to school for engineering.
Yeah.
What made you switch from, hey, I want to be an engineer, to, hey, cooking is what I really love, I would want to do this for the rest of my life?
Well, look, I was really good at math and science growing up. And guidance counselors back then were like, you're good at math and science, you should be an engineer, right? But I played an instrument, I played classical music, I did sports, I had a lot of art, I did a lot of art. Somehow, I don't know how, but my parents, I was raised in a way that I was detail-oriented, right? Some of that was from learning math, right? Math is a very detail-oriented thing that you have to do. Art is detail-oriented, and that being detail-oriented helped me in engineering. But I sat in a class in engineering. I don't know about you guys, but I just remember sitting in this class, looking at everybody, and I'm like, man, these are not my people, right? Like, they were super smart, and they were kind people, right? But they just weren't me. And I remember I had to, obviously I had to get a job to go to culinary school. And I remember being in the kitchen and being like, I can read about it and then go and do it and then practice it. I mean, in engineering, all I was doing for the first 3 years was just reading about it. I didn't do I didn't build anything. I was just solving equations, right? And so I got a cooking job and a bartending job, and I was like, oh, I really like this. And I found out you could make a living at it. And I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. There weren't big restaurants there at the time. There's a lot of bars in every town in Wisconsin, yeah. Make sure you guys stir that up, okay? Get down there and get in the sauce and everything, mix it up. But when I went to culinary school, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. I can do this. And also what I learned was I had an advantage in some areas too. I was disadvantaged in a lot of areas in experience and knowing how to cook. I mean, there were guys that were 45 years old that had been cooking for 20 years, right? But like I came into culinary school, automatically I was a math tutor, a French tutor, like because I had that behind me. And so when it came to running a business, when it came to understanding ratios, when it came to looking at a P&L, when it came to talking about your rate of return on your investment, like I have an advantage. Why? Because I was good at math, and I could do an Excel spreadsheet and some of that stuff.
Excel spreadsheet. I'm
Yeah.
glad you said that.
Spreadsheet grill. Yeah.
Thank you very much, chefs. We really appreciate it. And I think everyone's enjoying, correct?
Good.
Yes.
Make sure you get down there into the sauce, right? Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Everyone, thank you.
Cool. All right. Ooh, down to the skinny. Huh? Yeah, make 15 more. Oh, cheers.